The late summer sun beat down mercilessly on the Nevada territory, turning the desert floor into a shimmering furnace. Elias Hart wiped the sweat from his brow with a dusty sleeve, tasting the familiar metallic tang of silver dust that clung to everything in these parts. The entrance to his mind gaped like a dark mouth in the hillside, promising cool shadows and the faint hope of another vein. He'd been working alone for 3 years now, ever since his partner took fever and died. The solitude suited him fine, no arguments over claims, no splitting the meager findings, no one to witness the disappointment when another day yielded more rock than ore. The other miners called him lucky for striking that small vein last spring. But luck was a fickle mistress in the silver camps, and Elias knew better than to court her favor. The evening wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and creosote. Elias gathered his tools, preparing to head back to his cabin by the creek when he heard a sound that didn't belong to the desert evening. It was faint, rhythmic, like someone tapping Morse code against stone. He paused, Winchester in hand, listening. The sound came again from the auxiliary shaft, the one that had been boarded up since the cave-in 2 winters back. Nobody should be near that death trap. Elias approached cautiously, his boots crunching on loose shale. The boards across the entrance had been pried loose, hanging like broken teeth. "Hello," his voice echoed into the darkness. The tapping stopped. Against his better judgment, Elias lit his mining lamp and descended. The shaft was unstable, timber supports groaning under the weight of earth and time. 20 feet down, where the shaft opened into a small chamber, he found her. She sat propped against the rough wall, hands bound with what looked like dried gourd vine, the kind desert dwellers used for rope. Her white nurse's smock was torn and stained with dirt and something darker. Around her neck hung a crude wooden sign, letters burned deep, Angel of Death. Even in the lamplight's glow, Elias could see she was young, maybe 25, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins. Her lips were cracked from thirst, and her hands, Lord, her hands were swollen and blistered, giving off the sharp smell of carbolic acid. She watched him approach with eyes that held no fear, only a weary defiance. When he knelt beside her, she didn't flinch. "Easy now," Elias murmured, pulling out his knife. The blade caught the light as he cut through the vines. Her wrists were raw underneath, marked with angry welts. "Can you stand?" She tried, but her legs buckled. Without asking permission, Elias scooped her into his arms. She weighed less than a sack of ore, all bones and determination. Clutched against her chest was a small canvas medical bag and something else, a glass vial filled with silvery gray powder. The climb back up was treacherous. She didn't make a sound, even when he had to shift her weight to navigate the narrow passages. Her breath came shallow against his neck, and he could feel her trembling despite the heat. Outside, dusk was falling. Elias knew he had to move fast. Jeb Caro's mine guards made regular patrols, and finding someone like this marked and left for dead meant trouble he couldn't afford. But leaving her wasn't an option his conscience would allow. His cabin sat a half-mile away, tucked into a grove of cottonwoods by Coal Creek. It wasn't much, one room with a lean-to for storage, but it was clean and private. Elias laid her on his narrow cot, then barred the door and pulled the burlap curtains tight. In the lamplight, he could see her better. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, there was something refined about her features, a softness that spoke of a life before the mining camps. The sign around her neck seemed even more grotesque against her pale throat. "I'm going to take this off," he said, reaching for the sign. Her hand shot up, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. She shook her head violently. "All right." He pulled back. "Water first, then—" He heated water on the small stove, adding a pinch of salt. She drank slowly, carefully, like someone who knew the danger of too much too fast. When he offered her hardtack soaked in broth, she managed a few bites before exhaustion overtook her. "What's your name?" Elias asked. Silence. "Mine's Elias Hart. This is my claim, my cabin. You're safe here." Still nothing? She clutched her medical bag tighter and closed her eyes. I'll call you Nora then, if that's all right. My mother's name. A slight nod, barely perceptible. Elias busied himself making the space ready. He strung a rope across one corner and hung a blanket for privacy. His few possessions: a folding bed, pickaxe and shovel, coils of blasting cord, a Bible with a cracked leather cover, jars of sulfur powder for treating wounds he arranged to make room. The cabin had never felt so small. He heated more water and set out clean rags. I need to tend those wrists, he said through the blanket. And your hands, that carbolics burned them bad. She emerged slowly, the wooden sign still around her neck, and sat on the stool by the stove. Elias worked in silence, his movements careful and practiced. Mining taught a man to treat injuries, his own and others. The water in the basin turned pink, then darker. She never flinched, not even when he had to peel away dead skin. Her eyes followed his movements, cataloging, assessing. Despite her condition, there was an alertness about her that suggested medical training. The way she held her hands, palms up and fingers slightly curved, spoke of someone used to sterile procedures. You're a nurse, he said. It wasn't a question. The briefest hesitation, then a nod. From the camps, Virginia City. No response. When he finished, her hands were wrapped in clean strips torn from his only good shirt. She studied the bandages with what might have been approval, then retreated behind the blanket. Elias grabbed his bedroll and rifle. I'll be on the porch. You need anything, you call out. At the door, he paused. Whatever trouble you're in, miss, it won't find you here, not while I'm breathing. The night settled thick around the cabin. Elias sat with his back against the door, Winchester across his knees, watching the trail. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and another answered. The familiar sounds of the desert night should have been comforting, but something had shifted. The very air felt charged, like the moments before lightning strikes. Inside, he could hear her moving the creak of the cot, the soft rustle of fabric. Once, he thought he heard her whisper something, but the words were lost. When he looked through a crack in the door, he saw her sitting by the dying fire, one hand fingering what looked like wooden prayer beads, the other still clutching that gray vial. The desert wind picked up, rattling the tin roof and sending dust devils dancing across the yard. Elias pulled his hat low and settled in for a long watch. He'd prospected these hills long enough to know that some things were more valuable than silver. And sometimes what you found in the dark depths wasn't ore at all, but something or someone that could change everything. As the moon rose over the Nevada hills, casting long shadows across the claim, Elias' heart kept his vigil. In the morning, there would be questions, decisions, probably trouble. But for now, there was just the night, the wind, and a woman who wore death's name like a burden she couldn't put down. Whatever her story, whatever had driven someone to bind her hands and leave her in that shaft, Elias knew his quiet life had just become a lot more complicated. The smart thing would be to take her to town come morning, let the law sort it out. But something in her eyes, that mix of steel and sorrow, told him the law might be the last place she needed to be. So he sat and watched and waited for dawn to reveal what kind of trouble had literally fallen into his mine. Dawn crept across the desert like spilled honey, slow and golden. Elias stirred from his position against the door, joints protesting after the long night's watch. His first thought was to check on his unexpected guest, but movement inside the cabin told him she was already awake. He knocked softly on his own door. "Miss, I'm coming in." She sat at the small table, still wearing the stained nurse's smock, that wooden sign around her neck like a millstone. Her bandaged hands rested carefully on the rough wood, and she watched him enter with those same assessing eyes. In the morning light filtering through the burlap curtains, he could see the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "Morning," he said, moving to the stove. "I'll get some water heating, coffee too, if you take it." She remained silent, but her eyes followed his movements. There was something almost ritualistic about the way he worked filling the kettle from the water barrel, measuring out the precious coffee grounds, stoking the fire back to life. These simple morning tasks seemed to calm them both. When the water was warm, Elias poured some into a basin and set it before her with a clean cloth. She looked at it, then at him, a question in her eyes. "For your face and neck," he explained. "The dust gets into everything out here. Goes easier if you can wash it off regular." She dipped the cloth in the water, wringing it carefully with her bandaged hands. The first pass across her face removed layers of grime, revealing skin that was pale beneath the dirt. She worked methodically, starting at her forehead and moving down, the kind of thorough cleaning that spoke of medical training. Elias busied himself with breakfast hardtack softened in water, a precious tin of peaches he'd been saving, strips of jerky, not much, but it would fill the belly. He set a plate before her and took his own to eat standing by the window, giving her space. She ate slowly, carefully, occasionally pausing to sip water. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with unspoken questions. When she finished, she pushed the plate away and looked at him directly for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely there, like wind through dry leaves. "No need for thanks." Elias cleared the plates. "But I need to check those bandages. And if you're feeling up to it, maybe we could do something about that sign." Her hand went to the wooden placard, fingers tracing the burned letters. She shook her head. "All right, your choice." He gathered fresh bandages from his supplies. "May I?" She extended her hands. The carbolic burns were angry red, blistering in places, but cleaner now. He worked with the same careful attention as the night before, applying a salve made from desert aloe and animal fat. She watched him work, and he felt her studying his technique. "You've done this before," she said, voice still barely above a whisper. "Mining's dangerous work. Man learns to tend wounds or he doesn't last long." He wrapped fresh cloth around her palms. "These'll heal clean if we keep them dressed. The carbolic, that's physician stuff? You were working with it?" A long pause, then a small nod. "At the camps." Another pause. When she spoke, each word seemed to cost her St. Bridget's, Virginia City. Elias knew the place, a small charity ward run by Catholic sisters, tending to minors who couldn't afford the company doctors. It was a hard posting for anyone, let alone a young woman. He finished with her hands and moved to check her wrists. The rope burns were deep but beginning to scab over. As he worked, he noticed other things, a small scar on her forearm, old and well-healed, calluses on her fingers that spoke of years of work. The way she held herself, spine straight despite exhaustion. "How long were you in that shaft?" 2 days, maybe 3, her voice cracked. "Hard to tell in the dark." Anger flared in Elias's chest. 2 days, tied and left to die. The cruelty of it turned his stomach, but he kept his touch gentle, his voice calm. "Well, you're here now, safe." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Safe. I thought I knew what that word meant." When he finished with the bandages, Elias heated more water. This time he added soap shavings, producing a small luxury of suds. "For your hair," he explained, setting the basin on the table. "I'll step outside." "No." The word came quick, panicked. "Please, just turn away." He moved to the window, studying the trail outside while listening to the sounds of water and washing behind him. It was strangely intimate, this sharing of space with a stranger. His cabin had been his alone for so long. He'd forgotten what it was like to accommodate another person's presence. "There are clothes," he said to the window, "in the trunk. They were my partner Samuel's. He was a small man. They might fit well enough, better than what you're wearing. Anyway, your partner died 3 winters back. Fever took him quick." Elias traced a pattern in the window's dust. "Good man, godly man. He'd want his things put to use. The sounds of washing stopped. You can turn around. Her hair hung loose and damp, darker now with the dust washed out. She'd pushed it back from her face, revealing delicate features that seemed at odds with the harsh wooden sign. Water droplets still clung to her neck, and he found himself looking away. The trunk's there. He pointed to the corner. Take what you need. While she sorted through Samuel's things, Elias stepped onto the porch to give her privacy. The morning was heating up already, promising another scorching day. He scanned the trail, the habit of vigilance already ingrained. No dust clouds, no movement except a hawk circling high above. When he returned, she'd changed into a worn but clean shirt and canvas pants, rolled up at the cuffs. Samuel's clothes hung loose on her frame, but they were whole and decent. She'd kept the wooden sign, though, hung around her neck like a penance. Better. She nodded, then surprised him by speaking. Why didn't you take me to town to the sheriff? Elias considered his words carefully. Man doesn't leave a woman tied up in a mine shaft for no reason. Either you did something that warranted it, which I doubt, or someone wanted you gone. Either way, town might not be the safest place just yet. She sank onto the stool, energy seeming to drain from her. You don't know what you're risking. I know what's right. He pulled up the other stool, sitting across from her. My mother raised me to help folks in need. Do unto others, she'd say, simple as that. Nothing simple anymore. She touched the vial of gray powder she'd kept close, turning it in the light. This changed everything. What is it? She looked at him for a long moment, weighing trust like a miner weighs ore. Finally, she set the vial on the table between them. Death, she said simply. Slow death, dressed up as progress. The morning stretched on, marked by the slow dance of shadows across the floor. Elias made more coffee, strong and bitter. She accepted a cup, wrapping her bandaged hands around it for warmth despite the heat. They sat in companionable silence, two strangers bound by circumstance and an unspoken agreement to leave the hard questions for later. Nora, she said suddenly. You called me Nora last night, your mother's name. If you'd prefer something else. No, she almost smiled. Nora's fine, better than what's written here. She touched the sign. Safer too, maybe. Why keep it then, the sign? Her face closed off again. To remember, to not forget what happens when you tell the truth in a place built on lies. Elias wanted to press further, but the look in her eyes stopped him. There would be time for truth later. For now, it was enough that she was safe, fed, and beginning to trust him. The rest would come as it would. He stood, gathering his mining gear. I need to work the claim today. You should rest. There's food in the larder, water in the barrel. Bar the door behind me and don't open it for anyone. I'll knock 3 times when I return like this. He demonstrated on the table. Anyone else comes calling, you hide in the root cellar, trap doors under the rug. She stood too, swaying slightly. I could help. I know wounds, sickness. If you're hurt. Rest first. Healing comes before helping. He touched her shoulder gently, felt her tense, then relax. We'll figure out the rest as we go. At the door, he looked back. She stood in the middle of his small cabin, Samuel's clothes making her look even smaller, that damn sign around her neck like a brand. But there was steel in her spine, fire in her eyes. Whatever had been done to her, it hadn't broken her spirit. Thank you, she said again, for not asking questions, for the kindness. Questions can wait. Elias replied, right now. You just focus on getting strong again. Everything else? He gestured vaguely at the world beyond the door. It'll keep. He left her there, standing in the shaft of morning light, looking like something caught between earth and heaven, as he headed to the mine, Winchester over his shoulder and pick in hand. Elias' heart wondered what he'd gotten himself into, but he didn't regret it. Some things in life were worth the risk, And he had a feeling that Nora, whoever she really was, might be one of them. The third morning brought trouble with the dawn. Elias woke to the sound of horses' multiple sets of hooves moving slow and deliberate up the trail. He rolled from his bedroll on the porch, Winchester already in hand, and peered through the pre-dawn gloom. 2 riders, their mounts' shoes ringing with the distinctive sound of copper studs, Caro's men. He slipped inside, moving quiet as smoke. Nora was already awake, pressed against the wall by the window. She'd heard them too. In the dim light, he could see her clutching that canvas medical bag, knuckles white beneath the bandages. "Root cellar," he whispered. "Now." She moved without argument, rolling back the rug and dropping through the trap door with practiced silence. Elias replaced the rug, scattered some dirt over it, then positioned himself by the door. His coffee pot sat cold on the stove, no time to create the illusion of a normal morning. The knock came hard and demanding. "Hard open up, mind business." Elias recognized the voice Jack Stoddard, Caro's chief enforcer, a mean piece of work who enjoyed his job too much. Elias took a breath, schooled his features into sleepy confusion, and opened the door part way. "Jack, bit early for a social call." Stoddard stood on the porch, hand resting on his sidearm. Behind him, Will Meeker held a lantern, its light catching on his brass mine guard badge. Both men looked trail-worn, but alert. "Not a social call." Stoddard pushed past Elias into the cabin, eyes scanning the small space. "Looking for someone. Dangerous fugitive." "Out here." Elias kept his voice mild. "Uninterested. Only danger I've seen is rattlers and cave-ins." Meeker entered too, producing a folded paper from his coat. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a wanted notice. Even in the lantern light, Elias could read the bold print, "Wanted, Nora O'Keefe, poisoner, $100 reward." Below was a sketch that could have been any young woman, and text that made his blood run cold. "Wanted for the poisoning deaths of 7 miners during the recent labor dispute. Considered extremely dangerous. Dark hair, medium height, may be posing as medical personnel." "Nora O'Keefe," Stoddard said, watching Elias's face. "Irish witch. Killed 7 good men with her potions. Mr. Caro wants her found before she kills again." "Poisoned." Elias frowned at the paper, playing the part. "How?" "Bad whiskey," Meeker supplied. "She was working the charity ward, had access, slipped something in their medicine. They say all 7 died within hours of each other, foaming at the mouth." Elias handed the paper back, keeping his movement slow and unconcerned. "Terrible thing, but I haven't seen any women out here, Irish or otherwise. You know I keep to myself." Stoddard's eyes narrowed. He moved around the cabin, looking at everything. His gaze lingered on the table. 2 cups sat there. Elias realized with a jolt. 2 cups from yesterday's coffee. "Living pretty soft for a man alone," Stoddard observed. 2 cups, 2 plates in that wash basin. "Had a visitor yesterday. Tom Garrett from the next claim over. Shared a meal." The lie came smooth, supported by truth. Tom did visit occasionally, though not yesterday. "Garrett." Stoddard said the name like he was tasting it. "We'll check with him." "You do that." Elias leaned against the doorframe, projecting boredom. "Tom'll tell you same as me. Haven't seen any women, poisoners or otherwise." Meeker was poking around near the trunk, where Samuel's clothes lay folded. Elias forced himself not to react when the man lifted a shirt, examining it. "Small clothes for a miner. Were my partners, Samuel Boone, died 3 years back." Truth again. The best shield against suspicion. "Can't bring myself to throw them out." "Sentimental." Stoddard's voice dripped contempt. He moved to the window, looking out at the mine entrance visible up the hill. "You hear anything strange last few nights? See anything?" "Just the usual. Coyotes, Wind. Elias shrugged. Why's she supposed to be out this way? She escaped custody 3 nights ago, during transport. Stoddard turned from the window. Killed a guard, they say, vanished into the desert. Mr. Caro figures she might head for the remote claims, looking for somewhere to hide. Or she might be halfway to California by now. Elias suggested, if she's got any sense. Maybe. Stoddard moved toward the door, then paused. Funny thing, though, we found tracks near the old garrison shaft yesterday. Boot prints, too small for a man, and something else marks like someone was dragged. Elias's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. Garrison shaft's been closed 2 years. Board up myself after the cave-in. Dangerous place. Boards were loose when we checked. Stoddard's eyes bored into him. Someone's been there recent. Desert kids, maybe. They play in places they shouldn't. Elias met the man's stare without flinching. I'll nail them boards tighter next time I'm up that way. A long moment stretched between them. Finally. Stoddard stepped onto the porch. You see this woman? Hart, you don't approach. You signal us. 3 shots. Spaced. Mr. Caro's offering $100 reward, but she's dangerous. Killed 7 men, remember. I'll keep my eyes open, Elias promised. But I doubt she'd come here. Nothing out this way but rocks and dust. Meeker joined his partner on the porch. Check your locks. Hart, woman like that. No telling what she might do. They mounted their horses, leather creaking. Stoddard looked back once more. We'll be patrolling regular. Mr. Caro wants this matter settled quick. Bad for business. Having a poisoner loose. Elias watched them ride away, waiting until the dust settled and the hoofbeats faded. Even then, he stood listening, counting slowly to 100 before moving. In the desert, sound carried strange. Better to be certain. Finally, he pulled back the rug. They're gone. Nora climbed out, dust in her hair, that wooden sign still around her neck. She was shaking, just slightly, but her voice was steady. 7 men. You didn't poison anyone. It wasn't a question. She moved to the table, sinking onto a stool. No, but 7 men did die. That part's true. She looked at her bandaged hands. Mercury poisoning from the amalgamation process? I documented it, tried to report it. The men were working Caro's illegal recovery operation, using quicksilver to extract silver from old tailings. No ventilation, no safety measures. And you saw them at the charity ward. Brought in with tremors, drooling, minds going, classic signs of mercury exposure. I'd seen it before, back in San Francisco. I knew what it was. Her voice turned bitter. I was fool enough to think the truth mattered. Elias poured water from the pitcher, set it before her. So Caro blamed bad whiskey, said I'd poisoned them to support the strike, make the company look bad. She drank deeply. Had a judge in his pocket, witnesses who'd swear to anything. Would have been a quick trial and a quicker hanging, except Sister Aloysius, she ran St. Brigid's. She helped me escape during the transport, created a distraction. I ran. She touched the sign around her neck. But not before Caro's men caught me. They wanted to make an example. Angel of Death. They called me, said I'd brought death to the camps. And the guard who died? Her face went very still. There was no guard. That's just another lie to make sure I hang when they catch me. She looked up at him. Which they will. You heard them regular patrols. They'll be back, and they'll be more thorough. Then we'd better make sure they don't find anything. Elias began gathering evidence of her presence, the medical bag, the extra cup, any trace that might give her away. Can you ride? Yes, but where would I go? They'll watch the roads, the towns. Not talking about running. Not yet. He paused in his gathering. I'm talking about moving you somewhere they've already searched, somewhere they won't think to look again. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The garrison shaft. Different level, though. There's a side chamber about 40 feet down, dry and stable. I've cached supplies there before. It's not comfortable, but it's safe. We could set it up proper bedroll. Water, food. You'd only need to hide during their patrols. She stood, steadier now. And between patrols, we figure out how to prove what really happened to those men. He met her gaze. That is, if you trust me enough to try. She was quiet for a long moment, then reached up and removed the wooden sign from around her neck. She set it on the table between them, those burned letters dark against the pale wood. I poisoned my dignity wearing this. I won't poison it further by running forever. Then we'd best get moving. They might circle back to check my story with Tom Garrett. When they find out he wasn't here yesterday, they'll return with more questions. Together they gathered what she'd need: blankets, water, preserved food, candles, matches. Elias added a small pistol from his gear, showing her how to load and fire it. Her hands were steady despite the bandages. As they prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Why are you doing this? You could claim the reward. Be done with it. Elias considered the question. My mother used to say that the measure of a man wasn't in the gold he gathered, but in the good he did. Haven't had much chance for good out here. Maybe this is it. Or maybe it's the last thing you'll ever do. Maybe. He shouldered the pack of supplies. But I've been dying slow out here for years, mining dirt and loneliness. Least this way. If it goes bad, it'll mean something. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. It was small and sad and beautiful. Then I guess we'd better make sure it doesn't go bad. They left the cabin as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the claims. Behind them on the table, the wooden sign lay abandoned, its crude message already gathering dust. Whatever happened next, Nora O'Keefe would face it on her own terms, not as the angel of death, but as a woman who'd told the truth in a place where truth was the most dangerous ore of all. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty yard as Elias returned from checking his trap lines. He'd left Nora hidden in the garrison shaft's side chamber that morning, but the worry had gnawed at him all day. Now, approaching his cabin, he found her sitting in the dirt near the wood pile, drawing patterns with a stick. She looked up at his approach, and he saw she'd drawn the chemical symbol AG in the dust silver surrounded by small sage leaves she'd gathered. It was an odd sight, this educated woman making pictures in the dirt like a child. Yet there was something deliberate about it. Couldn't stay in that hole, she said simply. The dark got too heavy. He understood. The mine shafts had their own weight, pressing down on a person's spirit. He settled beside her, noting how she'd positioned herself to see anyone approaching from the trail. That's silver, he said, nodding at her drawing. Everything here is about silver. Her voice was different now, less hoarse, carrying hints of education and somewhere far from Nevada. Men die for it, kill for it, but they don't even know what it's doing to them. She set down the stick and turned to face him, her eyes holding that same fierce clarity he'd noticed before. I need to tell someone. Maybe if you know the truth, it won't die with me. You're not dying, Elias said firmly. We both know Caro won't stop hunting me. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. So listen, please. The wind picked up, stirring the sage and sending small dust devils across the yard. Elias waited, patient as he'd learned to be waiting for ore to reveal itself. I trained at St. Mary's in San Francisco, she began. Came to Virginia City 8 months ago, full of ideas about helping people. Sister Aloysius warned me it would be different here, but I didn't understand. Not really. She traced another symbol in the dust, Mercury. The first miner came in 2 months ago. James Paulson, family man, 3 children, tremors in his hands, couldn't hold his tools. Then came David Ng, a Chinese man from California. Same symptoms. Then more always from the same crew, always working Caro's special project. The recovery operation. Elias supplied. She nodded. Caro found a way to extract silver from old tailings using mercury. Heat the amalgam. The mercury vapors off, leaves pure silver behind. Except the vapors, she shuddered. The men were breathing it, day after day. Mercury vapor goes straight to the brain. And you documented this? Everything. Symptoms, progression, work histories. I even got one of the men to bring me a sample of the ore they were processing. She gestured toward her hidden medical bag. That gray powder in the vial, it's amalgam. Proof of what Caro was doing. Elias thought of the 7 dead men, the wanted poster, the lies building on lies. Why didn't you go to the territorial authorities? A bitter laugh escaped her. I tried. Wrote to the mining commission, the territorial governor. Nothing. Then I made my mistake. I confronted Caro directly. Told him his men were dying, that he needed to stop the operation or at least provide ventilation. Let me guess he didn't take it well. He laughed, said I was a hysterical woman who didn't understand business. But I saw his eyes. He knew exactly what he was doing. She picked up a sage leaf, crushing it between her fingers. The sharp scent filled the air. 3 days later, all 7 men were dead. Bad whiskey. The company doctor said, and suddenly there were witnesses saying they'd seen me near the saloon, carrying bottles. But you were at the hospital. Doesn't matter what's true when money talks louder. She looked at her bandaged hands. They arrested me that night. Quick trial scheduled. Conviction guaranteed. Sister Aloysius knew what would happen. She created a distraction during the transport, started a fire in a hay wagon. I ran. And Caro's men caught you. 2 days later, hiding in an abandoned shack. She touched her throat where the sign had hung. They wanted to make sure everyone knew what happened to those who crossed Jeb Caro. Angel of death. They kept saying, you brought death to honest working men. The shadows grew longer as she talked, her voice gaining strength with the telling. She described the mock trial they'd held in the desert, the sign they'd burned with a hot iron, the mine shaft they'd chosen for her tomb. Through it all, Elias heard not self-pity, but a burning anger at the injustice. I'm a healer, she said finally. I took an oath to do no harm, and they turned me into a monster in the eyes of everyone who matters. Not everyone, Elias said quietly. She looked at him then, searching his face. Why do you believe me? You don't know me. I could be lying. He thought about it, choosing his words careful as picking good ore from waste rock. My partner Samuel. He got sick 2 winters back. Not fever like I told Stoddard, that was easier than the truth. He got the shakes. Started seeing things that weren't there. Couldn't keep food down. Company doctor said it was drink. But Samuel never touched liquor. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Mercury poisoning. Didn't know it then. But he'd been working a claim that used the old Spanish method, mercury and silver heated together. Took him 3 months to die, piece by piece. Elias picked up a pebble, rolled it between his fingers. So when you talk about men dying with tremors and madness, I believe you, seen it myself. They sat in silence as the sun touched the western hills. Finally, Nora spoke again, her voice stronger now. I kept notes. Everything's in that journal in my medical bag. Names, dates, symptoms. If we could get it to someone who'd listen. Who you said yourself the authorities won't help. There's a federal mining inspector coming through next month. Charles Morrison. He's from Washington. Outside Caro's influence. If we could get the evidence to him. That's a lot of ifs. Elias stood, offering her his hand. But it's better than running. Come on, let's get you inside before full dark. Stoddard might come back for an evening check. She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. For a moment they stood close, and he could smell the sage she'd crushed mixed with carbolic and something uniquely her. Then she stepped back, brushing dust from Samuel's borrowed clothes. Inside the cabin, Elias lit the lamps while Nora retrieved her medical bag from its hiding spot. She pulled out a leather journal, its pages covered with neat handwriting and careful diagrams. Here, she said, opening to a marked page. Everything's here. The men's names, their symptoms, the progression of the poisoning. And this, she showed him a page of chemical equations. This proves the mercury vapor would have been at lethal concentrations in an enclosed space. Elias studied the pages, impressed despite himself. You write like a doctor. I wanted to be one, but they don't let women into medical college. So I became a nurse instead. She closed the journal carefully. Maybe if I'd been a doctor, they would have listened. Or maybe Caro would have just buried you deeper. Elias said, Men like him don't care about titles. They care about threats to their profits. She set the journal on the table, next to the vial of amalgam. Evidence of crimes and cover-ups, sitting quiet as death in his simple cabin. So what do we do now? Now we plan. Morrison comes through in a month. We need to keep you hidden until then, and figure out how to get your evidence to him without Caro knowing. Elias moved to the window, checking the trail out of habit. It won't be easy. Stoddard will keep coming around, and others too. I could leave, head further into the desert, find another place. No. The word came out sharper than he intended. He softened his tone. Running makes you look guilty. Besides, desert's no place for a woman alone, especially one who doesn't know the waterholes and safe paths. And staying here doesn't put you in danger. He turned from the window to find her watching him with those direct eyes. I've been in danger since the day I set foot in these hills. At least now it's for something worthwhile. She was quiet for a moment, then moved to stand beside him at the window. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I don't even know why you're helping me. Really, not the answer you gave before, but the true reason. Elias considered lying, giving her another easy answer about right and wrong. But she'd trusted him with her truth. She deserved his, maybe because I've been alone too long. Maybe because seeing you standing up to men like Caro reminds me there's still good worth fighting for. Or maybe, he paused, then pushed on. Maybe because when I found you in that shaft, wearing that sign, looking like death but still holding on to your evidence, I saw someone who wouldn't let them win, and I'm tired of watching the Caros of the world win. She smiled then, small but genuine. That's 3 maybes. Pick whichever one you like. They're all true enough. The night deepened around them, bringing the familiar sounds of the desert coming alive. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Inside the cabin, 2 unlikely allies stood side by side, watching darkness fall over a land built on silver and secrets, knowing that tomorrow would bring new dangers but facing them together. The days fell into a rhythm as careful as a miner testing unstable ground. Mornings. Elias would check the trail for fresh tracks before letting Nora emerge from wherever she'd hidden for the night, sometimes the root cellar, sometimes the garrison shaft, once in a hollow beneath a fallen cottonwood when Stoddard's patrol came too close to predict. It was during these stolen hours of normalcy that something shifted between them, subtle as ore changing color in the light. Hold still, Nora commanded, her voice carrying that nurse's authority as she examined a gash on Elias's forearm. He'd caught it on a broken timber in the mine, too focused on listening for patrol horses to watch where he was reaching. Her touch was gentle but sure, cleaning the wound with water she'd boiled and cooled. The carbolic burns on her hands were healing well, leaving only faint pink marks. She worked with the same methodical care he'd observed from the first day, every movement purposeful, efficient. You'll need stitches, she said, already reaching for her medical bag. Unless you prefer a scar. Another scar won't hurt my looks none, Elias said, trying for lightness. But she was already threading a needle with gut, her face set in concentration. Scars tell stories, she murmured, beginning the first stitch. This one will say you were careless, or that I was distracted keeping a wanted woman safe. She paused. Needle halfway through. Is that what you tell yourself, that you're keeping me safe? Aren't I? Perhaps we're keeping each other safe. She resumed her work, each stitch neat and precise. You from a life of solitude. Me from a rope. It was the closest they'd come to acknowledging what was growing between them, this careful dance of trust and something deeper. When she finished, she wrapped his arm with clean cloth, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. "There," she said. "Try not to tear it open again." These medical moments became routine. Elias would return from the mine with the usual collection of cuts, bruises, and strains that came with the work. Nora would tend them with a mix of professional skill and personal concern that made his small cabin feel less like a shelter and more like a home. In return, he taught her the language of the desert, how to read the sky for weather, where to find water in the dry washes, which plants could heal and which would harm. She proved a quick student, absorbing knowledge with the same intensity she'd applied to her medical training. "Creosote," she said one evening, crushing the leaves between her fingers. "Smells like rain." Desert folks call it greasewood. Tea from the leaves helps with stomach troubles. He showed her how to identify the plant's small yellow flowers. Samuel swore by it. Your partner knew herb lore. His grandmother was Delaware. Taught him things that weren't in any medical book. Elias smiled at the memory. He'd have liked you. Appreciated someone who understood that healing's more than what they teach in cities. She looked up at him, evening light catching the gold flecks in her eyes. "Tell me about him, Samuel." So he did, as they prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread. Elias talked about the quiet man who'd shared his claim for 2 years, Samuel's faith that ran deep as bedrock, his gift for finding water, his terrible singing that scared off claim jumpers better than any gun. "He sounds like a good man," Nora said when he finished. "The best, made me promise before he died that I'd use his savings for something worthwhile. Been sitting on that money 3 years now, not knowing what he'd consider worth it." Elias looked at her across the table. "Think maybe I found it." The weight of that statement settled between them. Nora set down her spoon carefully. "Elias, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Just saying Samuel would have wanted his money to help someone who deserved it. Getting you safe. Getting your evidence to Morrison that's worthwhile." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've never had anyone believe in me the way you do. Even at the hospital, they tolerated my questions more than encouraged them. And here you are, risking everything for a woman you found half dead in a mine shaft. You make it sound noble. Maybe I'm just a fool who's been alone too long." "Maybe?" She smiled, soft and sad. "But I'm grateful for your foolishness." Later, as had become their custom, they sat outside watching the stars emerge. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and intimate at once. Nora had taken to wearing an old coat of Elias's against the evening chill, and seeing her wrapped in something of his stirred feelings he wasn't ready to name. "I never thanked you properly," she said suddenly, "for the clothes, the food, the shelter, for believing me." "No thanks needed." "Yes, there is." She turned to face him, starlight catching in her hair. "I need you to know I've never felt about anyone the way I'm starting to feel about you, and it frightens me." Elias's heart kicked against his ribs. "Why?" "Because I can't afford feelings right now. Not with Caro hunting me. Not with 7 men's deaths on my conscience." "Their deaths aren't on you," he interrupted. "Caro killed them sure as if he'd shot them." "I know that here." She touched her head. "But not here." Her hand moved to her heart. "And what I feel for you, it's a luxury I can't afford, a distraction that could get us both killed." He wanted to argue, to tell her that what was growing between them was the opposite of a distraction. It was the thing that made all the danger worthwhile. But he understood her fear. In the mining camps, caring for someone was just another vulnerability to exploit. "I'm not asking you to feel anything," he said finally. "We focus on keeping you safe, getting your evidence to Morrison. Everything else can wait." "Can it?" She looked at him with those direct eyes. "Can you honestly say you don't think about it? About what might be possible if I weren't a wanted woman? I think about a lot of things. Doesn't mean I act on them. No, she agreed. You're careful, cautious. It's kept you alive out here. She stood, brushing dust from her borrowed trousers. I should check the dressings on your arm before bed. Inside, she unwrapped the bandage with hands that trembled slightly. The wound was healing clean, her stitches holding well. As she worked, Elias caught her scent carbolic and sage and something indefinably her. Nora, he said softly. She looked up, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes, want and fear and hope, all tangled together like roots in rocky soil. I know, she whispered. I know we can't, but sometimes, when you look at me like that, I forget why. Then I'll stop looking. Don't. The word came quick, almost desperate. It's the only thing that makes me feel real anymore, like I'm more than just a problem to be solved or a fugitive to be hidden. She finished wrapping his arm, but didn't step away. They stood close in the lamplight, the space between them charged with possibility and restraint. In another life, she said softly, I'd have met you at a church social or a harvest dance. You'd have asked my father permission to court me. Everything proper and right. This life's the only one we've got, Elias replied. And maybe it's better this way, no pretense, no games, just truth between us. The truth is dangerous. Everything worth having is... She smiled at that. Sad and beautiful. You sound like Samuel. Faith deep as bedrock, you said. Maybe some of it rubbed off. A coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell. Nora stepped back, gathering her medical supplies. I should rest. Tomorrow you'll need to check the cache at Garrison Shaft. Make sure the supplies are still good. And you'll need to hide again. Yes. She paused at the curtain that divided the room. But for tonight, I'm here. We're safe. That's enough. After she retreated behind the curtain, Elias sat by the dying fire, thinking about the careful walls they'd built between them. Necessary walls, perhaps, but he could feel them weakening with each shared meal, each medical tending, each evening watching stars. He thought about her words in another life and wondered if such a thing were possible, if somewhere, in some kinder world, they could have met without the shadow of death between them. But as he'd told her, this was the only life they had, and despite everything, he wouldn't trade these dangerous, difficult days with her for all the safety in the world. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending tumbleweeds scratching against the walls. But inside the cabin, two people separated by a curtain and circumstance held tight to a growing connection that defied logic and threatened everything they were trying to protect. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, patrols and hiding, and the constant fear of discovery. But tonight, in the quiet darkness, they could pretend that caring for each other wasn't the most dangerous thing of all. The accident came on a Thursday, sudden as a rattlesnake strike. Elias was working the lower drift, following a promising vein of ore. When his lamp flickered, he paused, lifting it to check the oil, a moment's distraction that saved his life. The timber above him groaned, a sound every miner knew to fear. He dove sideways just as the support beam split, bringing down a cascade of rock and splintered wood where he'd been standing. His lamp flew from his hand, oil spattering across the walls before the flame caught. Fire raced along the oil trail, igniting the pine tar used to seal the timbers. In seconds, the narrow drift filled with acrid smoke. Elias scrambled backward, but the cave-in had blocked the main passage. The only way out was deeper into the mine, toward the old workings where bad air pooled. He pulled his shirt over his nose, breathing shallow as his father had taught him years ago. The fire spread along the resin-soaked beams, orange tongues licking at the low ceiling. Smoke thickened, turning the air black. His eyes streamed tears as he felt his way along the wall. Searching for the connecting tunnel he knew was somewhere ahead. A voice cut through the roar of flames. Elias! He turned, disoriented. Through the smoke, He saw her Nora, a wet cloth tied over her face, carrying his spare lamp. "What are you doing here?" he had to shout over the crackling fire. "Heard the collapse, saw smoke." She grabbed his arm. "This way, the air shaft." She led him through the choking darkness with surprising confidence. She'd been studying the mine during her explorations, memorizing the layout he'd sketched for her. They stumbled through a narrow passage he'd forgotten existed, the heat growing fierce at their backs. "Here," she pointed up at a natural chimney in the rock. "Can you climb?" The opening was tight, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. But above, he could see a faint gleam of daylight. "You first." "No, you're already suffering from the smoke. Go." There was no time to argue. Elias hauled himself up, rock tearing at his clothes, his lungs burning with each breath. Behind him, he could hear Nora following, her breathing labored but steady. Halfway up, his strength began to fail. The smoke had risen with them, and dark spots danced in his vision. He felt Nora's hand on his boot, pushing. "Don't you dare stop," she gasped. "Move!" The command in her voice sparked something primal. He clawed upward, fingers bloody on the rough stone, until suddenly he was out, sprawling on the sun-baked ground. He turned immediately, reaching back for her. She emerged like a birth, covered in soot and coughing violently. They crawled away from the chimney as smoke billowed out behind them. When they were safe, they collapsed side by side, gulping clean desert air. "The mine," Elias croaked when he could speak. "The whole lower drift." "Is gone," Nora's voice was hoarse. "But you're alive." She turned to examine him with professional eyes, checking his breathing, his pupils, the burns on his hands from the hot stone. Her own face was streaked with soot and tears, her hair singed at the edges, but her hands were steady as she worked. "You could have died," he said, coming after me. "Don't." She pressed a finger to his lips, leaving a smudge of ash. "Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't risk." The gesture broke something between them. He caught her hand, holding it against his face. She went still, eyes wide and dark in her soot-stained face. "Nora," he breathed. She leaned toward him, drawn by the same force that had sent her into a burning mine. Their lips met, tentative at first, tasting smoke and fear and desperate relief, then deeper, hungrier, all the careful restraint of the past weeks consumed like timber in flame. She pulled back first, trembling. "We're a mess." "We're alive." He traced a clean line through the soot on her cheek. "When I thought I might die down there, all I could think was that I'd never told you." "I know." She caught his hand, pressing it to her heart where he could feel it racing. "I know because I thought the same when I saw that smoke, that I'd been a coward, letting fear keep me from this." They kissed again, there on the ground with the mine smoking behind them and the sun beating down. It was graceless and desperate and perfect, two people choosing each other in defiance of every reason not to. When they finally parted, Nora laughed a sound of pure, startled joy. "Look at us, like we've been rolling in a coal bin." "Come on." Elias stood, pulling her up. "Let's get to the creek." They stumbled down to the water, stripping away outer garments without shame or hesitation. The cold water was shocking against their overheated skin. Nora scrubbed at the soot in her hair while Elias rinsed the blood from his scraped hands. "You're mine," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry." "It's just a hole in the ground." He watched her wring water from her hair, struck by how beautiful she looked, even now wet and bedraggled and worried. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first." She waded closer, water swirling around her waist. "I suppose that makes us even." "I don't want to be even." The words came out rough, honest. "I want God help me. Nora, I want everything. I want mornings waking up beside you and evenings watching stars. I want to hear you laugh without looking over your shoulder. I want a life with you that isn't built on hiding and fear." She reached for him, framing his face with her hands. I want that too, but wanting doesn't make it possible. Then we make it possible? He covered her hands with his. After Morrison comes. After your name is cleared. If my name is cleared, if we survive that long, if Caro doesn't... He silenced her with another kiss, pouring all his determination into it. When he pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. No more ifs, he said firmly. We've been living on ifs and maybes for weeks. Today showed me how fast everything can change. I won't waste any more time pretending I don't love you. The word hung between them, massive as the mountains, simple as breathing. Love, she repeated softly. Is that what this is? What else would you call it? This feeling like my chest might crack open when you smile, like I'd walk through fire for you literally. As it turns out, she laughed, but it turned into a sob halfway through. No one has ever... Then let me be the first. He pulled her close, water lapping around them. Let me love you, Nora. However long we have, let me love you. She nodded against his shoulder, her own words muffled but clear. I love you too. God help me. I've been falling in love with you since you cut those ropes in the mine. Maybe before, maybe the moment you looked at me and saw a person instead of a problem. They stood there in the creek, holding each other while the smoke from the mine drifted across the sky. Everything had changed in the span of an hour. His livelihood gone. Their careful boundaries shattered. Their hearts laid bare as the desert stones. Finally, Nora pulled back, practical even in the midst of emotional upheaval. We need to check your lungs properly, and those hands need bandaging. And we should see if anything can be salvaged from the mine. Always the nurse, he said, but fondly. Always the patient, she countered. Come on, let's get you properly tended. They waded back to shore, gathering their smoke-stained clothes. As they walked back toward the cabin, Elias felt the weight of what had happened, both the loss and the gain. His mine was likely ruined, months of work destroyed. But beside him walked a woman who'd risked everything to save him, who'd finally allowed him past her careful walls. What will you do now? She asked. Without the mine? Find another way. There's still Samuel's savings. Maybe work for one of the other operations until... No? She stopped walking. Not Caro's operations. Promise me. I promise. He squeezed her hand. We'll find another way. Together. The words settled between them like a vow. Together. Whatever came next, patrols and hiding, testimony and danger, they would face it as one. The fire had burned away more than timber and stone. It had consumed the last barriers between them, leaving something pure and strong as refined silver in its wake. As they reached the cabin, Nora turned for one last look at the smoke rising from the hillside. Out of ashes, she murmured. What? Something Sister Aloysius used to say. Out of ashes, beauty. Out of fire, faith. She looked up at him. Maybe she was right. Elias thought of the mine he'd worked for years. Now, a smoking ruin. Thought of the woman beside him. No longer a stranger to be protected, but his heart's own choice. Maybe she was. They went inside together, leaving the smoke and destruction behind, carrying only what mattered each other, and a love forged in flame and chosen in full knowledge of the cost. The evening after the fire, Elias built a small blaze in the yard despite the risk. Some things needed burning, and the wooden sign that had hung around Nora's neck for weeks was one of them. You're sure? He asked, holding the crude placard with its burned letters spelling Angel of Death. Nora stood beside him, her hand finding his in the flickering light. I'm sure. I've carried their hatred long enough. He set the sign atop the kindling. The old wood caught quickly, letters blackening and curling inward like dying spiders. They watched in silence as the lie turned to ash, smoke carrying it away on the desert wind. There, Elias said when nothing remained but glowing coals. Gone. The memory isn't... She touched her throat where the rope had rubbed raw. But maybe that's good. Maybe we need to remember what hatred looks like, so we can recognize it next time. They returned to the cabin where Nora had laid out her medical supplies on the table. The mine fire had aggravated the injuries Elias hadn't realized he'd sustained cuts from the falling rock, burns from the hot stone, lungs still rough from smoke. "Sit," she commanded. "All business now. Shirt off." He complied, wincing as the movement pulled at scraped skin. She examined him with clinical detachment, though he caught her fingers trembling slightly when they traced a particularly deep gash along his ribs. "This needs cleaning," she murmured, preparing her instruments. "It's deeper than I thought." The next hour passed in focused work. She cleaned each wound with the same methodical care he'd observed before, but now there was an intimacy to it. When she leaned close to stitch the worst cut, her breath warm against his skin. He had to close his eyes against the sensation. "Am I hurting you?" she asked. "No." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Just different now." She understood. Her hand stilled for a moment before resuming its work. "Everything's different now." When she finished with his wounds, she sat back, surveying her handiwork. Bandages wrapped his ribs and hands. Salve glistened on the minor burns, but her eyes kept returning to his face, searching. "What is it?" he asked. "I was so frightened," she admitted quietly. "When I saw that smoke, when I couldn't find you at first, I've seen death. Elias. Watched men slip away despite everything I could do, but the thought of you," her voice broke. He caught her hands, still slightly trembling. "But you came anyway, into a burning mine." "I had to?" She met his eyes. "That's when I knew for certain, when running toward danger felt safer than living without you." He pulled her onto his lap, careful of his bandages. She came willingly, curling against him like she belonged there. They sat quietly, listening to the night sounds beyond the walls. "We need to talk about what comes next," she said eventually. "The mine is gone. Caro's men will notice the smoke. Come investigating." "I know." He'd been thinking the same. "We need to move up our timeline. Get to Morrison sooner." "But he won't arrive for 2 more weeks. Then we go to him. There's a federal office in Carson City. We could—" "No." She sat up, fear flashing in her eyes. "The roads, the towns. Caro has people everywhere. We'd never make it." "Then we make sure your evidence is safe. Whatever happens." Elias had been turning this over in his mind. "I'll bury most of Samuel's silver tonight, along with your journal and the vial. Mark the spot so it can be found if we need someone else to find it." She understood what he wasn't saying. If something happened to them, the truth could still surface. "Where?" "There's a place by the old Spanish diggings. Sacred ground to the Paiute. Even Caro's men won't dig there." He stood, setting her gently aside. "I'll prepare everything tonight, and we need to rig some defenses, just in case." Defenses?" "I've got blasting powder left from the mine. Know how to set charges. If they come for us hard, we'll have options." She watched him gather supplies oilcloth to wrap the evidence. His old service revolver, ammunition. "You're preparing for war. I'm preparing to protect what matters." He paused at the door. "That's you, Nora. You matter more than all the silver in Nevada." While he worked outside, she busied herself inside, organizing what they might need to grab quickly. Her medical bag, now restocked. Water, food, basic supplies. She found herself touching things that had become familiar: his coffee cup, the Bible with its cracked cover, the blanket that had divided them those first cautious nights. When Elias returned, dirt under his nails from digging, she had coffee waiting. They sat at the table, the space between them charged with everything that had changed. "It's done," he said. "Evidence is safe, and I set charges at the bridge over Willow Creek. Only way to reach the cabin by horseback. We'll hear them coming. Have time to retreat to the hills if needed." And if Morrison doesn't believe us, if Caro's influence reaches that far, then we keep going. California, Oregon, wherever we need to. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I meant what I said earlier. I want a life with you, Nora. If that life has to start with running, so be it. She turned his hand over, tracing the calluses and scars. I never expected this. When they tied me in that shaft, I thought my story was over. Then you found me, and everything I thought I knew about my life changed. Maybe that's how the best stories go. Not the way we plan, but the way they need to. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The familiar sound made them both tense now, wondering if it was truly wildlife or a signal between watchers. We should set watches, Elias said. Take turns sleeping. Together, Nora said firmly. Whatever happens, we face it together. They prepared for bed with new awareness. When Nora changed behind the curtain, Elias found himself picturing her movements. When she emerged in one of Samuel's nightshirts, hair loose around her shoulders, his breath caught. I'll take first watch, he said. No. She moved to where he sat by the window. Neither of us is sleeping tonight. We both know it. She was right. The air itself felt electric, charged with danger and possibility. They sat together by the window, watching the trail, her head on his shoulder. Tell me about after, she said softly. When this is over, what do you see? He thought about it, building a future in words. A small place at first. Maybe work at one of the stamp mills while we save money. You could help the miners' families, set up a proper clinic. Eventually, maybe our own land. Nothing fancy, just enough to build on. Children, the question was barely a whisper. If you want them, many as you want. She laughed softly. A house full of little miners and nurses. Why not teach them to read the earth and heal what's broken? Useful skills. And we'd be married? There was something vulnerable in the question. Soon as we reach a preacher, sooner if you'll let me speak the words myself. She lifted her head to look at him. What words? In the dim light, his face was serious as a sermon. That I take you as my wife, Nora, to have and hold from this day forward, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death do us part. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Elias, I know it's not legal, but it's true, every word. She kissed him then, salt of tears mixing with the sweetness. When she pulled back, her voice was steady. Then I take you as my husband, to have and hold from this day forward, whatever comes, wherever we go, till death do us part. They sealed it with another kiss, longer and deeper. It wasn't legal, wasn't sanctified by any authority but their own hearts. But in that moment, in their besieged cabin with danger circling like wolves, it was enough. My wife, Elias murmured, testing the words. My husband, she replied, and smiled through her tears. They kept watch together through the night, hands entwined, hearts pledged. When dawn came without incident, they were grateful but not relieved. The storm was coming. They could feel it in the air, see it in the unusual dust clouds on the horizon. Today, maybe, Nora said. Maybe, but we're ready. She squeezed his hand. As ready as we can be. The sun rose over the Nevada hills, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, somewhere out there. Caro's men were stirring, preparing for another day of hunting. But in the small cabin by Coal Creek, two people who'd spoken vows only their hearts could witness faced the dawn together, unafraid. Virginia City rose from the desert like a fever dream, all wood and tin and ambition baking under the Nevada sun. Elias and Nora entered on foot just after dark, having left their horses hidden in a canyon 2 miles out. The streets teemed with miners ending their shifts, saloon girls beginning theirs, and merchants counting the day's profits. Nora pulled the hood of her cloak forward, hiding her face. They dirtied her skin with dust and wrapped her in Elias's old mining clothes. but anyone looking close might recognize the wanted woman from the posters. "St. Bridget's is on the north side," she whispered. "Behind the Methodist church." They moved through the crowds like shadows, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Caro's men might patrol. The familiar sounds and smells of the mining town whiskey. Sweat, smelter smoke seemed alien now, threatening. Every face could be an enemy, every alley a trap. St. Bridget's sat small and humble between grander buildings, its wooden cross barely visible in the darkness. Nora led him around back to a door half hidden by climbing roses. "Sister Aloysius planted these," she murmured, touching the blooms. "Said beauty could grow anywhere if you were stubborn enough." She knocked 3 short, 2 long, a pattern, Elias realized. The door opened a crack, lamplight spilling out. "Child," the voice was elderly, accented, Irish, like Nora's name. "It's me, sister." Nora pushed back her hood. "I need your help." The door flew open. Sister Aloysius was a small woman, built like a sparrow, but with eyes sharp as any hawk's. She pulled Nora into a fierce embrace, then held her at arm's length, examining her. "They said you were dead," the nun said. "Said terrible things." "All lies," Nora's voice cracked. "You know I didn't poison anyone." "Of course I know." Sister Aloysius noticed Elias then, standing protective behind Nora. "And this is Elias Hart. He saved me. We're—" Nora hesitated, then lifted her chin. "We're married." The nun's eyebrows rose, but she merely nodded. "Come inside, both of you, quickly now." The charity ward was as Elias had imagined, clean but sparse. Rows of empty beds waiting for the next wave of injured miners. Sister Aloysius led them to a small office, closing the door firmly. "Tell me everything," she commanded. Nora did, her words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. The mercury poisoning, the cover-up, the false accusations. Her voice steadied as she produced her journal, showing the careful documentation. Sister Aloysius studied the pages, her face growing grimmer with each entry. "I treated those men too," she said finally. "I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. The company doctor insisted it was drink." "We need witnesses," Elias said. "People who'll speak up when the federal inspector arrives." "Morrison," the nun shook her head. "He's not coming. Word came yesterday his visit's been postponed indefinitely. Some trouble with the railroad. They say—" Nora sagged in her chair. "Caro, he must have—" "Wait." Sister Aloysius held up a hand. "Morrison may not be coming, but someone else is. There's to be a public meeting tomorrow night. The territorial governor is sending a representative to hear grievances about the recent deaths. It's meant to calm the miners, stop talk of another strike." A representative. Elias leaned forward. "Who?" "Judge William Brennan from Carson City. He's said to be honest, though whether that extends to standing against Caro—" She shrugged. "It's a chance," Nora said. "If we could present the evidence publicly, with witnesses—" "Caro will be there," Elias warned. "His men too. It could be a trap." "Or an opportunity." Sister Aloysius stood, moving to a cabinet. "The miners are angry. 7 of their brothers dead, and the explanations don't sit right. If they heard the truth—" She pulled out a bundle of papers. "These are signed statements from the widows. They all say the same thing: their husbands complained of tremors and confusion before they died. Not the signs of bad whiskey." Nora took the papers with shaking hands. "They believed me." "They knew their men, knew them better than any company doctor." The nun's face softened. "You weren't wrong to speak out, child. Just unfortunate in your enemies." A bell rang somewhere in the building. Sister Aloysius tensed. "That's the front door. Stay here." She slipped out, leaving them in tense silence. Elias moved to Nora, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, solid and warm. "Tomorrow night," she said quietly. It all comes down to tomorrow night. We'll be ready. He kissed the top of her head. Whatever happens, we face it together. Sister Aloysius returned, looking troubled. Marshal Pike is here with 2 deputies. They're searching the charity wards, claiming to look for a theft suspect. They know. Nora breathed. Perhaps, but they won't search the chapel. Come. She led them through dark corridors to a small chapel adorned with simple wooden saints. Behind the altar, she revealed a narrow door. The previous sisters hid Chinese families here during the troubles of 69 inches, she explained. You'll be safe until tomorrow. The hidden room was cramped but clean, with blankets and a supply of water. As they settled in, Sister Aloysius paused at the door. I'll gather who I can. The minister from the Methodist Church has no love for Caro. Neither does Dr. Hartwell. He's been questioning those death certificates privately. By tomorrow night, you won't stand alone. After she left, Elias and Nora sat in the dim space, processing everything. The public meeting changed their plans entirely. No more hiding, no more running. Tomorrow they would stand in front of the entire town and accuse one of its most powerful men of murder. Are you frightened? Elias asked. Terrified. She found his hand in the darkness. But also relieved. At least it will be over, one way or another. Caro won't go down easy, even with witnesses, even with evidence. I know. She turned to face him. That's why I need you to promise me something. Nora. If something happens tomorrow, if Caro's men try to stop us, promise you'll get the evidence to someone who can use it. Don't let their deaths be for nothing. Nothing's going to happen to you. His voice was fierce. I won't let it. You can't promise that. She touched his face, tracing the worry lines. We both know how this could end, but at least we've had these weeks together, our night as husband and wife. Don't talk like that, like you're saying goodbye. I'm saying I love you. She kissed him softly. I'm saying that whatever tomorrow brings, I regret nothing. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I'd die alone. That's worth any risk. They held each other in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of the town beyond the walls. Somewhere out there, Caro was planning his own moves, marshaling his forces. The law, the money, the power all on his side. But in the morning, they would have something else. Truth, witnesses, the righteous anger of people pushed too far. Tell me about that house again. Nora whispered, the one we'll build when this is over. So he did, painting pictures with words of a future bright as silver. A small farm by a clear stream. A medical practice where she could heal without fear. Children playing in the yard, learning their letters and numbers, growing up free. And Sunday dinners, she added, with Sister Aloysius visiting, scandalizing the neighbors with her stories. A garden full of roses like the ones outside. A room just for books. A porch for watching sunsets. They built their dream house word by word, room by room, until the fear receded and hope took its place. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but tonight, hidden in a chapel while their enemies searched the streets, they had each other in the unshakable certainty that some truths were worth any sacrifice to tell. When dawn light finally crept through the cracks around the door, they were ready. The journal with its damning evidence, the vial of mercury-laced ore, the statements from the widows. All the pieces that would either free them or condemn them, waiting for the moment of truth. Together, Nora asked, checking her medical bag one last time. Together, Elias confirmed, checking his revolver. Outside, Virginia City was waking up, unaware that the day would bring a reckoning years in the making. In a few hours, the truth about 7 dead miners would finally be spoken aloud. And God help anyone who tried to silence it again. The miners' hall erupted in chaos the moment Nora stood to speak. Jeb Caro, seated in the front row like a king holding court, had drawn his pistol and fired into the ceiling. stopping her testimony before it could properly begin. "Nobody moves," he shouted over the screams. "This woman is a wanted criminal." But his show of force had an unexpected effect. The miners, already on edge from weeks of unrest, surged to their feet. Someone shoved Caro's gun arm, sending his next shot wild. In seconds, the orderly meeting dissolved into a brawl. "The documents," Nora shouted to Elias over the din. "Get them to the judge." Judge Brennan stood frozen on the platform, his face pale as violence erupted around him. Elias fought through the crowd, shielding the evidence with his body. A fist caught him in the ribs, but he pushed forward. Then someone knocked over a kerosene lamp. Fire spread across the floor like spilled water, catching on the sawdust and dry timber. The fighting turned to panic as smoke began to fill the hall. Men stampeded for the exits, trampling each other in their desperation. "Fire everyone out!" Nora's voice cut through the chaos with medical authority. She'd climbed onto a bench, directing the evacuation. "North doors blocked, use the windows." Elias reached the platform just as Judge Brennan was making his own escape. "Your Honor, the evidence you need to see." "Not now, man." The judge pushed past him. The heat intensified. Overhead beams began to groan. Through the smoke, Elias saw Caro and Marshal Pike heading for Nora, determination clear in their movements. "No." He abandoned the judge, fighting back through the crowd. But there were too many bodies, too much chaos. Nora saw them coming. Instead of running, she stood her ground, pulling something from her medical bag, the vial of mercury amalgam. She held it high, the silver-gray powder catching the firelight. "You want evidence. Caro," she shouted. "Here it is, the same poison you used to kill 7 men. "Lying witch!" Caro lunged for her, but the bench collapsed under their combined weight. They hit the floor hard, the vial shattering between them. Mercury amalgam scattered across the burning floorboards, its toxic dust mixing with smoke. Nora rolled away, coughing, but Caro had grabbed her ankle. "You've ruined everything." His face was twisted with rage. "Do you know how much money—" His words cut off as Elias's fist connected with his jaw. The mine owner went down, and Elias pulled Nora to her feet. "We need to go." But she was already moving, not toward the exit, but deeper into the burning building. The children. There were children in the balcony. He followed without hesitation. The upper level was thick with smoke. Visibility near zero. They found 3 young boys huddled against the far wall, too terrified to move. "It's all right," Nora said, her voice calm despite the inferno around them. "We're going to get you out." Working together, they shepherded the children to a window. Elias kicked out the glass, then lowered each boy to the crowd of hands waiting below. The last child clung to Nora, sobbing. "My papa, he was inside. He's out," she soothed, though she couldn't know for certain. "He's waiting for you. Be brave now." The moment the last child was safe, a section of roof collapsed behind them. Burning timber crashed down, blocking their retreat. The window was their only exit now. "You first," Elias said. "Together." She gripped his hand. "We go together." They jumped. The landing was hard, Elias taking the brunt of it as he tried to shield Nora. Pain shot through his ankle, but hands were already pulling them away from the burning building. He looked back to see the entire structure engulfed, flames leaping into the night sky. "The hall," someone moaned. "Our meeting hall." But Nora was already at work, organizing the evacuation efforts with the same efficiency she'd shown in the crisis. "You tear down those sheets for bandages, get water from the horse troughs, anyone with medical knowledge. To me." She moved through the crowd like a general marshalling troops, treating burns and smoke inhalation, directing the able-bodied to help the injured. Even those who'd believed Caro's lies about her couldn't deny what they were seeing a healer at work, saving lives without regard for her own safety. Sister Aloysius appeared with nuns from St. Brigid's, carrying medical supplies. Dr. Hartwell joined them, and together they established a makeshift treatment area in the street. "Where's Caro?" Elias asked, scanning the crowd. "Slipped away in the chaos," someone said. "Him and Pike both, probably heading for his compound." The fire had spread to neighboring buildings. A bucket brigade formed, miners working alongside merchants and saloon girls to save what they could. But the drugstore went up. Then the assay office. When the explosions started, stored chemicals igniting, everyone pulled back. Through it all, Nora worked tirelessly. She treated a burned child with the same focus she gave a burly miner, her hands steady despite her own injuries. Elias saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she favored her left side where she'd hit the ground, but she didn't stop. Judge Brennan reappeared, his fine clothes singed and dirty. He watched Nora directing the medical efforts, saw the reverence in the faces of those she helped. "The evidence," he said to Elias. "You tried to give me evidence." "Burned in the fire," Elias said bitterly, "along with the truth." "Perhaps not." Sister Aloysius approached, her habit smudged with soot. "Judge Brennan, I have copies of the medical records. The widows have their husbands' effects work clothes still contaminated with mercury. And now," she gestured to the crowd, "now you have 100 witnesses who saw Jeb Caro try to silence testimony with violence." The judge looked around at the burning town, the injured being tended, the woman who'd risked everything to save children from a fire. "I'll need full statements, from everyone." "You'll have them," the nun promised. Dawn was breaking by the time the fires were controlled. Half a block of Virginia City lay in smoking ruins, but the losses could have been far worse. Nora had finally collapsed from exhaustion, and Elias held her as she slept against his shoulder, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. Miners approached throughout the morning, some shamefaced, others defiant. They pressed coins into Elias's hands, offerings for the woman who'd saved their children, their friends, their town. "We were wrong," one grizzled prospector said. "She ain't no angel of death. She's just an angel." "She's a woman," Elias corrected gently. "A brave woman who told the truth. That's miracle enough." Marshal Pike appeared around noon, his badge notably absent. "Judge wants to see you both, when she's able." "And Caro," Pike's jaw tightened. "Holed up in his compound with his private guards, but his smelter workers are walking off the job. Word spreading about what really killed those 7 men. He paused. "I'll be needing a new badge. I reckon this one's tarnished past cleaning." He dropped the marshal's star in the dust and walked away. Nora stirred, wincing. "Did we win?" "Look around," Elias said softly. She did, taking in the scene, where last night a mob had gathered to watch her arrest. Now families camped in the street, sharing food and water. Miners who'd been ready to fight each other worked side by side clearing debris. And through it all, people nodded respectfully when they caught her eye. "The truth won," she said wonderingly. "Truth and a woman too stubborn to let it die." He kissed her temple. "Though next time, maybe we could reveal corruption without burning down half the town." She laughed, then winced as it pulled at her injuries. "I'll consider it." Judge Brennan approached, accompanied by Dr. Hartwell and several prominent citizens. "Miss O'Keefe, or should I say Mrs. Hart, I owe you an apology, and the territory owes you justice." "I just want the killing to stop," Nora said. "The mercury, the lies, all of it." "It will." The judge's voice carried the weight of law. "I'll be appointing a special commission to investigate not just the 7 deaths, but all of Caro's operations. In the meantime," he produced an official-looking document, "a full pardon for any and all charges against you, signed and witnessed." Nora took the paper with trembling hands. After weeks of running, hiding, fighting for her life, freedom felt almost anticlimactic. "What about Caro?" Elias asked. "That's for the federal authorities now. But I suspect Mr. Caro will find Nevada considerably less hospitable than he's accustomed to." The judge tipped his hat. "Good day to you both, And thank you. As the officials departed, Sister Aloysius approached with a knowing smile. So, married. Are you? Nora blushed. We spoke vows to each other. Well, Father Miguel owes me a favor. I'm sure he could make it official, if you're interested. Yes, they said in unison, then laughed at their eagerness. The nun's eyes twinkled. This afternoon, then, though perhaps after you've both had a bath, you smell like a smelter. As the sun climbed higher over the damaged but still standing town, Elias helped Nora to her feet. Around them, Virginia City began the slow work of rebuilding not just structures, but trust. It would take time, but the foundation was there. Ready to go home? He asked. She looked up at him, this miner who'd saved her life and stolen her heart. I am home. And there in the street, surrounded by ashes and hope, he kissed her while the town watched and approved. The angel of death was gone. In her place stood Nora Hart, healer and truth-teller, finally free to build the life she'd dreamed of in the dark. The morning sun painted the white birches along Silver Creek in shades of gold and copper. 3 months had passed since the fire in Virginia City, and the small valley Elias had found looked nothing like it had that first day. Where once stood only grass and stone, now a modest cabin rose beside the water, its logs still fragrant with pine sap. Nora emerged from the cabin carrying her medical bag, now bearing a neatly painted sign, M. Hart Healing Services, open at sunset. She'd kept her given name professionally Maeve, meaning gentle one in the Old Irish. It suited her better than Nora ever had, she said, now that she no longer needed to hide. Morning rounds, Elias asked from where he worked on the ventilation system for their small mining operation. No mercury here, they'd agreed on that from the start. Just traditional methods, slower but clean. The Jacobson baby has croup again, and Mrs. Chen asked me to check her husband's breathing. She adjusted her shawl against the autumn chill. I'll be back by noon. He caught her hand as she passed, pulling her close for a kiss that still made her cheeks pink after 2 months of marriage. Father Miguel had done right by them, performing the ceremony in what remained of the miners' hall with half the town as witnesses. Be careful on the trail, he said. Saw bear tracks yesterday near the upper meadow. I'll take Biscuit. She's sensible enough to avoid trouble. She traced a finger along his jaw. Unlike her owners. He grinned. Trouble's what brought us together. Trouble in a mine shaft. She kissed him once more. Don't work too hard. Remember what I said about your back. After she rode off, Elias returned to his work with a contentment he'd never known in his solitary years. The claim was modest, but promising enough silver to live on without the desperate scramble that drove men to dangerous shortcuts. More importantly, other miners had started adopting his ventilation designs, slowly changing how things were done in the territory. By noon, the sun had warmed the valley enough that he shed his coat. He was adjusting the water wheel they'd built for the small stamp mill when he heard horses approaching. His hand went automatically to the rifle propped nearby. Old habits died hard but relaxed when he recognized the riders. Tom Garrett from the neighboring claim approached with 2 companions. Hart, got a proposition for you. Elias straightened, wiping his hands. Tom, gentlemen, this is Ben Morrison and Carl Hoffman. They've got claims up Willow Creek way. Tom dismounted, his face serious. We've been talking about what you done with the ventilation here, how you're processing without mercury. What about it? Morrison, a younger man with earnest eyes, spoke up. We want to learn, form a sort of association. I guess share knowledge about safer methods, maybe even pool resources for equipment. My boy's getting old enough to work with me, Hoffman added. I don't want him breathing poison. None of us do. Not after what happened to those 7. Elias felt something ease in his chest. Change. Real change. Starting with a handful of men who decided their lives were worth more than quick profits. I'd be glad to show you, he said, Come on, I'll walk you through the system. They were deep in discussion when Maeve returned, leading Biscuit carefully down the trail. She smiled at the sight of the men clustered around Elias's diagrams, their faces intent as he explained airflow patterns. "Gentlemen," she greeted them. "Staying for coffee?" "If it's no trouble, ma'am," Tom said, hat in hand. "Your husband's just revolutionizing mining, is all." "He has a talent for revolution," she said dryly, earning chuckles all around. While the men continued their planning, she prepared a simple meal. Through the window, she watched Elias animated with purpose, sketching modifications in the dirt. This was what she'd hoped for, not just survival, but the chance to make a difference. After the visitors left, promising to return with more interested miners, Elias found her sitting by the creek, feet bare in the cold water. "Revolutionizing mining, am I?" he said, settling beside her. "One ventilation shaft at a time." She leaned into him. "I'm proud of you. We did this together. None of it happens without your truth coming to light." She was quiet for a moment, watching the water ripple over stones. "I got a letter today, from Sister Aloysius." "Oh, Caro's trial starts next month. Federal prosecutors want me to testify." She pulled the letter from her pocket. "She says they have enough evidence to convict without me, but my testimony would seal it." Elias tensed. "You don't have to go back there." "I know." She folded the letter carefully. "But those 7 men deserve to have their story told properly. In court, under oath, where it can't be twisted or buried. Then we'll go together." "You have the association meeting. We'll wait." His voice was firm. "I told you once, whatever we face together. That hasn't changed." She smiled, threading her fingers through his. "Do you ever regret it finding me in that shaft? Your quiet life got considerably louder after that." "Every morning," he said solemnly. "I wake up regretting it." She started to pull away, but he held tight, grinning. "I regret not finding you sooner. Think of all the arguments we missed, all the medical lectures I could have enjoyed." She splashed water at him. "I don't lecture." "Yesterday, you spent 20 minutes explaining why I should wear gloves when handling blasting powder." "That's not lecturing. That's preserving your fingers so you can continue to be useful around here." "Ah, so I'm useful. Occasionally." But her eyes were warm, belying the teasing words. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they walked back to the cabin hand in hand. The small sign by the door caught the light, "Heart and Maeve Clean Silver, Healing Care Open at Sunset." It wasn't the grand life either might have imagined in their youth, but it was theirs, built on truth and trust and the kind of love that could survive fire. Inside, Maeve checked her supplies while Elias stoked the stove. Soon, miners and their families would begin arriving, seeking treatment for the various ailments that came with hard labor. She'd teach them about mercury poisoning, about protecting themselves, about demanding better from those who profited from their work. "The Hendricks are coming tonight," she said. "Little Sarah's cough is back." "I'll set up the extra chairs." They worked in comfortable synchronization, preparing their home to receive those who needed help. It struck Elias how far they'd come from that first night, when he'd found her tied and left for dead, wearing a sign that named her falsely. "Maeve," he said suddenly. She looked up from arranging medicine bottles. "Yes." "Your name, Maeve, means gentle." He crossed to her, framing her face with work-roughened hands. "But you're not gentle. You're fierce and brave and stubborn as bedrock. You stood up to men who could have killed you, saved a town that was ready to hang you. Gentle doesn't cover it." She covered his hands with hers, the faint scars from old burns barely visible now. "Sister Aloysius told me once that gentle doesn't mean weak. It means choosing kindness when you have the power to choose otherwise, healing when you could harm, building when you could destroy." "Then I married well," he said softly. "Because you've chosen to build something here with me, when you could have gone anywhere, been anything. I am exactly where I want to be." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "With exactly who I want to be with." A knock at the door interrupted them, the first of the evening's patients arriving. As Maeve went to answer it, Elias touched the small silver band on her finger, remembering the day he'd placed it there with the whole town watching. They'd faced fire and lies, persecution and violence. They'd lost a mine but gained a purpose. And in this small valley beside Silver Creek, they were building something that would last longer than any vein of ore, a place where truth mattered, where healing happened, where love had triumphed over fear. The door opened to reveal a nervous young miner with his pregnant wife. "Ma'am, we heard you help folks. My Mary here. She's been feeling poorly." "Come in," Maeve said warmly. "Both of you. Let's see what we can do." As she led them inside, Elias caught her eye over their heads. She smiled. That private smile meant just for him, and he knew with certainty that every risk had been worth it for this their life together. Their work, their love that had begun in darkness but now lived in light. Outside, Silver Creek continued its eternal song, and the evening star appeared above the mountains. Somewhere, silver waited in the ground, cold and perfect. But inside the cabin, something far more precious flourished, a love tested by fire, proven in trial, and strong enough to last forever. The story of the miner and the healer had become legend in the camps, told around fires and in saloons. But here in their valley, it was simply life beautiful, difficult, and entirely their own. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Elias and Maeve's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, truth, and love in the Nevada mining camps, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these frontier romances. Your support means the world and helps me continue bringing you these authentic stories from America's untamed past.